to open Mark 4 Supra taillights. These taillights are pretty easy. The 90s JDM cars, they're all sealed with butyl, so it is pretty easy to open. Let's start with tools. To open these, you're gonna need a couple of things, starting with, why is it not focused? Starting with cling wrap. This is what we use to protect the lens once it's open. We don't want to scratch this at all, so just use this, good protection. To actually open the light, you're gonna need a heat gun, or we like to use an oven. So this is just like a spare oven that I had, and we put it out in the garage. And we also use these right here. These are rubber mats designed to go inside the oven. These have been in here for years, still no problems. They're really gross, but that's what they're used for. You can also use a hairdryer if you don't have a heat gun and you're not allowed to use the oven. It does work. We prefer the oven because it has much more even heat. If you use the heat gun or a hairdryer, it's pretty spotty and you can melt specific spots if you're not careful. Next up is gonna be a Phillips head screwdriver. These taillights have screws in the back, so you'll need to remove those. You can use just a regular hand screwdriver, or I like to use an impact. It's just faster. After that is various size flathead screwdrivers. So the pocket screwdrivers are really good for releasing the tabs, and then you can use the bigger flatheads to make the job quicker. We also use panel poppers occasionally. As you can see, it's well used. But we really only use these if there's a light giving us trouble. So we'll probably just stick with these for this build. Pro tip is to use a little magnet tray like this to keep track of your screws so you don't lose them. And to also use some of these foam pads. These are really nice just in case you accidentally drop the light or whatever. It's gonna protect the light a lot more than just this, and it's also less likely to scratch. For this oven, we like to use 220 degrees at about 8 minutes. Your oven may be a little bit different, so I would start with a cooler temperature and work your way up. Okay, let's go ahead and put this in the oven. Close that up, and 8 minutes. Time to take it out. Okay, with it hot, I'm gonna start with the screws. The reason why I didn't remove the screws at first is because there is a little bit of butyl that gets on the screws, and it's just easier to do once it's already hot. It loosens up that butyl enough to take the screws out. Okay, first thing you want to do is wrap the lens. While we're working on this, we don't want to scratch it. So, cling wrap on the lens. Now we can set it face down without worrying about any scratches. I like to start with the pocket screwdriver so I can release the tabs. There are 3 tabs, 1, 2, 3. Those need to be released. So I just take the tip of my pocket screwdriver, go right in between, and lightly pry. Not enough to actually leave it, but just enough to release the tab. With those released, then you can use your bigger screwdriver. I'm gonna go with probably the medium size. I'm gonna get in there, and instead of prying directly down, I'm gonna try and get the flathead part underneath the lens and just lightly turn the screwdriver so that I can release the butyl from the back housing. You will remove some, that's fine. You can just set it aside. Go around the corner here. Gotta be careful, this plastic, this back housing is pretty thin. It is pretty easy to tear. So you don't want to pry directly down for that reason. What? Sorry. Now we've done the easy part. The hardest part is this top line right here, because this fin is made onto the lens. So it is really hard to actually get a screwdriver into there. The good news is that there's no tabs. So once you have it loose enough, you can pull it apart with your fingers and you shouldn't have any problems. But just in case, I'm gonna go ahead and go around these edges one more time just to make sure that I have it as loose as possible. Took the screwdriver as far in as I could. If you do keep going with the screwdriver, you could potentially tear the back housing. That's bad. So I'm gonna take my fingers and just peel it apart like this. Using a pocket screwdriver to get rid of the strings. There we go.
So, I forgot to film the next part where you actually, reseal the light, but I do have footage of it from doing a Miata, which is a very similar shape and the exact same process. So I'm gonna edit that in right now.
Once you've done your modifications, start the process of putting the lens back on. In this case, we had gray butyl in there. You can see all the way around it was gray. So I've actually got some gray retro rubber that we're gonna put in here to just go ahead and match it. The border on this has to get painted black anyway, so it's no big deal if this is gray.
I recommend going with the black retro rubber for the Supra lights though.
Start by unraveling the retro rubber. This is really thick. Go ahead and stretch it so that it fits into the trough better, and you're just gonna wanna fill up the trough with the butyl. You really don't want water to leak. Once you have your butyl set in place, you can now get this thing prepped and ready for the lens to go on. What I like to do is use compressed air to clean out any dust or any debris that I have just sitting in there that's gonna make it look bad. Put some pressure on it.
There is a right way to put the lens back on. The fin obviously goes on the top, and the bolt holes on the back of the lens should line up with the bolt holes on the inner housing.
Now we gotta go back in the oven.
Definitely don't want that. Let's open this. Take this. Set it in there.
Gonna need you a couple of these clips. This is gonna be used to hold the lens onto the back housing so that while the adhesive is cooling off, the lens stays in place.
That's 8 minutes.
In order to protect the lens from the clips, I use some microfibers. Add clips. All right, so now we're gonna let this cool off. And once it's completely cooled, then it will be completely sealed, watertight, and that lens is not going anywhere. Okay, bye.